Hello and welcome to the Trekitt Podcast, where we talk about everything outdoor related, from kit and locations to stories and the people behind them. Whether you're a walker, climber, mountaineer or just someone that loves being outside, you can find all the kit and advice for your next adventure on our website, which is www.trekitt.co.uk. Or you can actually come and speak to a real person right here in our service centre in Hereford. Hello and good morning. This is Paul here from Trekitt, and we are in the rather lovely but warm Trekitt Podcast room. And when I say we, we've got Harry, we've got Lorna from Trekitt, and we've also got Anna from Montane. Hello, Anna.
Hi, Paul.
Hi. What are we doing here today, I hear you ask? No, I can't hear you. But anyway, we are going to be talking to Anna about Montane's environmental responsibility and what they're doing to make sure their products and their manufacturing processes are basically as environmentally friendly and as sustainable as possible. It's all a bit of a buzz at the moment, everything environmental. So we thought we would take a bit of a deep dive with Anna and find out exactly what Montane are doing to meet their environmental responsibilities. So, Anna, let's start with you, seeing as you're here. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you do, what your background is, what it is you do at Montane? Just give us a brief intro.
Yep, sure. So I am Montane CSR manager, and I've been at Montane for about 8 years, but I've just been in this role for the past year, and before that I was in the design team. So CSR is corporate social responsibility for people who...
I'm glad you clarified that, because I was going to ask.
That's always the first question, so yeah. And so that spans environmental and social considerations.
And how long have you been doing that?
Just for the past year.
Okay.
So yeah, before that I was the women's wear designer. So yeah.
Okay, so what made you move into CSR from design?
It's always been an interest, and it's just something that I'd kind of looked at when I did my undergraduate degree in fashion design and had a kind of interest in sustainable textiles and sustainable fashion. And then it's been something that we started looking at as a brand for about the last 4 or 5 years. And it had been a kind of focus of mine alongside the women's wear design work that I was doing. And then, it's becoming more of a focus. It's more of a thing that people are wanting information about, both consumers and retailers, and us as a business. We needed somebody focusing on putting those structures in place internally. So I've moved into doing that full time, and we've brought someone else on board to design the women's products.
Cool. So was that something that you drove from within Montane, or was that something that kind of Montane as an entity were trying to embrace anyway?
A little bit of both, I guess. When we started doing it kind of 4 or 5 years ago, it was kind of driven by me, maybe because it was an interest. But obviously it was something that we were being asked for, but not as much as we are today. And then that kind of desire for information has grown and the brand has grown. So when we were bought a couple of years ago by Inverleith, the business has grown quite a lot since then. So that's enabled us to have more people working at the business. It's meant that they've been able to create this role for me and expand the design team as well. So
awesome.
Yeah, it's all positive.
Awesome. And it's going well?
It's all going well. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Are you getting to see changes that you want to see happen?
Yeah, definitely.
Stuff getting done?
Yeah, definitely. And that's the exciting part of it. So we're kind of, everything's moving in the right direction. There's a lot of change. But it's really nice to be a part of that change and hopefully kind of moving towards something positive, and everything's moving in the right direction. So it's good to see.
Yeah, it is good. It is really good. Absolutely. I think the whole outdoor industry has a kind of a massive responsibility. You know, we're all advocating that people go outside and enjoy the environment, but we need to be taking better care of it.
Yeah, and I think that's why the outdoor industry has got so much more focus on it from consumers than maybe the fashion industry. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the processes are similar and the supply chains are similar, but for the products that we're making, then people want to get outdoors and use them, and we want to protect that environment at the same time. So yeah, it's really important finding that balance.
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the products themselves. We're all big fans of the Dart range of base layers. And traditionally, they were made of plastic. There's no getting away from it. It's a very unenvironmentally friendly product. But now they're pretty much 100% recycled, or extremely close to that. And how much of the range do you think is going to follow that pattern? How much of Montane's range is that a goal? Is that an aim? 100% recycled?
So we haven't put a goal on being 100% recycled by a fixed season, mainly because doing that is dependent on availability and technology, and our kind of priority first and foremost is durability and having high performance products. So if we said we just want to switch everything into being recycled, and doing that in a relatively short time frame, there'd be that risk over whether that recycled alternative could perform to the same standard as the virgin one that we use at the moment might do. So we're switching into recycled where we can, where we've done the fabric testing and the wear testing, where we've got that confidence, then we're making those switches. So more and more of the range is moving over to recycled. But we're kind of looking at other materials across the range where we can also make changes. So looking at things like cotton, all of our cotton is organic, whether that's 100% cotton or a blend. All of the wool that we're using is certified non-mulesed. All of the down is either recycled
Hang on.
you got like all these other certifications.
Let's rewind a bit. Something is non-mulesed?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Explain.
So wool, if it uses mulesing as a practice, it's where, so you get merino sheep, and merino sheep yield a higher amount of wool because of the surface of their skin's super wrinkly.
Okay.
They create more wool and it's super fine, and that's why it's all soft and people use it for clothing. But because of the wrinkles in the skin, the sheep are prone to fly strike. So if they get, essentially it's like maggots that will live in the wrinkles of skin. Nice. And to treat it, if they're treated without anaesthetic, and the flesh can just be chopped off the animal, and that's mulesing. Ooh. And it's a really common practice.
So to get the fleece, they skin the sheep?
Yeah, well, no, to get the wool, they'll shear it, but to get rid of any areas of flesh where they're infected with the maggots, they'll just chop it off, and they don't always use anaesthetic, so it's like really awful. Yeah. It's banned by a lot of companies, but it's also used by a lot of companies. So it's one of the things, it costs a bit more to have non-mulesed wool, but for years we've had that as a standard. I think a lot of outdoor brands have that as a standard, that the wool has to be certified non-mulesed. Yeah. So that's been a standard for years, and then with other things we've kind of moved towards them. Like the down has been certified for years as being certified to the responsible down standard. But things like cotton, we've always used organic cotton in our t-shirts, but we've had cotton blends in other items, so like hats and trousers and things. So we've now made sure that all of that is also 100% organic. So it's looking at all those other kind of periphery materials that we maybe don't use as much of, like we would with polyester and nylon, and making sure that they're also being responsibly sourced. So that's been a big focus, is looking at where we can meet certifications in terms of sourcing responsibly.
So who's driving this? Who's driving this kind of push to environmentalism? Is it coming from consumers right sort of backwards down the chain, or is it coming from material suppliers? Because you sit in the middle, don't you? As a brand, as a manufacturer of clothing, you sit in the middle. So you're buying your materials from the supplier, and the consumer's buying them. So where's the demand coming from for more environmentally products?
I think it's split. So we've got the consumers are asking for recycled products or more sustainable products. Retailers are asking us for the same, saying, we need you to hit certain criteria so that we can have that confidence in the product, presumably because they're being asked by consumers as well. We've got the other end of it where legislation's changing, and that's a big thing in the industry, that this industry hasn't been legislated before, so there's a lot of legislation in the pipeline, which will really help to put the guidelines and the boundaries in place for people to know what standards we need to hit. So there's kind of pressure coming from a couple of sides, and I think that's the pressure that's ended up with fabric suppliers and why they've developed more and more recycled alternatives or PFC-free alternatives. So there's more and more of that becoming available, but not all of it meets the same performance standards as the original virgin version, which is why we need to do that product testing and make sure that we're happy with it before we put it into the range. Yeah,
that kind of brings me on to my next point, really, is whilst you're doing the right thing environmentally, are the products still fit for purpose? I mean, you talked about PFC-free DWRs.
Yeah.
Remind me what a PFC is.
perfluorinated compound.
Okay, and DWR. Harry and I bang on about this all the time. It's a durable water repellent.
Yeah.
So that's the bit that makes the water bead up on the outside of a waterproof jacket.
Yeah.
So in this country, in the UK, we've got a very damp, wet, well, not today we haven't, it's 37 degrees today, but we normally have a very wet climate.
Yeah.
And the DWR is kind of a fundamental part of a waterproof jacket. And they used to be, I remember, when they were really, really good, and you hardly ever had to replenish them. And now it seems that you've got to replenish them a lot. So is the environmental effect and the sustainable effect degrading product? And how do you overcome that? How do you make sure that the products last the same, perform the same?
Yeah, definitely.
Or don't they? Do people just have to accept that they get a better environmental product, but they've got to treat it differently?
Yeah, I think that's it. There's that shift in consumer awareness and consumer behaviour in a similar way to, talking about consumer consumption habits changing and people not over consuming, keeping products for longer. It's the same with how you treat your products and shifting how often you might wash a waterproof jacket and whether you reproof it and things like that. But with the PFC-free DWRs, the standard of performance typically is lower than what we've used in the past, so like the C6 and the C8 that people used to use and don't anymore. But yeah, with PFC-free, because the performance is a bit lower, there needs to be that shift in awareness from consumers about taking care of the product properly, following the wash care instructions, reproofing it regularly, that kind of thing. But a lot of products actually don't need a C6 DWR on them, so that's standardly what's been used. It's high performance, everybody relies on it, and it performs for a long time. But actually, legwear and packs and insulated jackets don't necessarily need that level of durable water resistance. And then you've got products where they do, that are kind of critical pro shell jackets that are going to be used in challenging environments. And that's where we haven't made that full shift yet. So while we have introduced PFC-free DWRs into the range, we haven't made the full switch yet because we're kind of waiting for that technology to get slightly better for the application onto those kinds of products. And so things like our down suit that goes up to the top of Everest and those high-performing shell jackets that really is critical that they have a good DWR on them. They'll be the last things to change.
Yeah. That's a tough sell, though. I mean, speaking from a retailer's point of view, you're trying to reassure a customer that the jacket they're performing is they're spending a lot of money on it. It's a high performance piece of kit, and then it's like, well, every couple of weeks or so, or every month or so, you're going to have to wash this. You're going to have to reproof it, and it's always been a tough sell. People. I don't know what it is. It's maybe the communication's just not getting out there well enough, but we still see customers in the shop who are surprised that they can wash and reproof their Gore-Tex jacket.
Yeah,
it's like the message isn't getting out there somehow.
I think it's just a really complex topic, and a lot of people, because you never really had to understand it before, it just worked, and it worked for a long time, and so you never really had to think about it in detail. And now it's quite a complex topic to get people's heads around, and they need to have that level of understanding. But I guess the shift will have to come because eventually the legislation will come. PFC-free will be the only option that everybody uses, and that will be the choice that consumers have. And
that will be the norm.
So hopefully between now and that period, consumers will start to understand it better, and obviously brands and retailers can help with that process. But yeah, eventually that's where the industry will end up, and where it needs to end up to be more environmentally responsible. So,
absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, the other aspect, I suppose, to this, I've always been an advocate of buy once and buy well. Buy the best that you can afford in terms of quality and craftsmanship and materials. Case in point, I've got a shirt on today which is nearly 7 years old. And it's a good shirt and it lasts a long time and you look after it. So is that something that you're trying to encourage? I mean, I think as retailers as well, we should be encouraging people to repair rather than replace, if possible. That there are services around that will repair kit. But is that something that Montane's trying to encourage as well?
Yeah, 100%. So we've got our life cycle management process of the products and how how they move through the range and when they get replenished or updated. So that only focuses on 2 seasons, of spring, summer and autumn, winter. So that's kind of different from the fashion industry where you've got multiple seasons throughout the year. And then from the colour angle, we've got the majority being quite commercial colours, so that they've got that longevity. They can be worn for a long time. They're not going to drop out of fashion. And then where we do introduce new colours, they're a kind of seasonal update on the previous season's new colours, so that they can be merchandised together. So we've got confidence that a retailer who's bought from the last season, who buys into the new season, those products can be merchandised together because there'll be a kind of tonal variation on each other.
It does beg the question. I mean, why change it? You know, if you've got a red Gore-Tex jacket that works really well, why not just keep making a red Gore-Tex jacket that works really well?
Good question.
I
guess from colours like that, it just depends on demand and what the voice of most people is saying. If we're being asked for that, with a colour like red or black, maybe there's no need for that to change because it is what it is. With things like blue, there's obviously a lot of variations on whether it's bright, kind of dusty, dull colour, a navy colour. So it depends whether it's a spring, summer season or a winter season, and how long that colour might have been in the range, what we're seeing with the trends. But we need it to be something that we think is going to last a long time and not be something that a consumer wants to replace quickly. So that's the kind of the colour and life cycle management side of it. And then you mentioned repairs. So we do have a repair service as well. So that's been going for 4 years now. And it's a UK repair service at the moment. So I think eventually that will expand out to other countries. But for now it's a UK service, and Claire works her magic on things that come back to us that need repairs. So
consumers send directly back to you? Via, I guess, your website? Is there
so on the
information
website
on there?
There's a repair section of the website, and consumers can see there. There's a kind of general price list of whether it's zip needs replacing or a press stud or a patch repair. There's kind of prices associated with that, and then if it's something that doesn't fit the price list, people can send in a picture and get a customized quote. But we've got someone who works on site who does the repairs, and she's amazing.
I'm sure. But I'm guessing that's just Montane stuff coming back.
It's just Montane stuff that we're repairing for now.
Because you've got the fabrics and you've got the raw materials that match.
And also we're still a relatively small business with a relatively small site. We've got one person doing repairs, so at the moment it's down to resource as well, what we can handle. She's got a lot of stuff coming through.
I was going to ask, is that something that's grown?
Yeah, definitely. So that's been brilliant that we introduced it in 2018. And then so Claire's been with us since then, working full-time on doing the repairs. And we've definitely seen an uptake in that. So we've also got our retail shop as well. So she repairs direct for consumers who send stuff back to us. And then also anything that comes back to us that might go into our retail store with a repair tag on it.
Okay. Yeah.
So she does all of it.
Big up to Claire.
Yeah, definitely.
So as well as product, which you're obviously working hard to make as environmentally friendly and sustainable as possible, we see it. Obviously, we unpack pallet loads of stuff at our warehouse, and everything's wrapped in plastic. What's going on there?
Yes, so all of the products that we send out at the moment to retailers are wrapped in a poly bag. And one of the biggest changes that we've made in the last few years is to switch that plastic to being 100% recycled. A lot of people do ask, well, why do you need a poly bag at all? And ultimately that's about the protection of the products, because actually if the product gets damaged in transit, that's even less sustainable, because all of the resources that have gone into making that product are kind of wasted. Yeah,
I guess it has to be sent back, it has to be checked, backwards and forwards, road miles, etc., more packaging.
Yeah. So we've switched our poly bags into being 100% recycled material, and we were also part of the European Outdoor Group's single-use plastics project. So they were set up in 2018. We joined in 2019. And that project is ultimately working to recapture and recycle polybag waste from the outdoor industry. So it's about over 30 brands and retailers who are members, and they're collecting up those polybags and putting them back into the system and recycling them. into pellets because the plastic is clear, so it's got a value.
Right.
Whereas there's a lot of plastic that's either mixed or it's black and it's low value. Clear plastic's got a good value. It can be turned into lots of things. So getting that back into the system so that it can be reused is really important.
So these are brands sending back packaging that's been used?
Yep. Yeah. So brands and retailers
Right.
collecting up those poly bags, baling them, and then sending them back to a central recycler so that they can be turned into clear plastic pellets so they can be reused again. So yeah, the idea is to keep them out of the hands of consumers who maybe don't have access to recycling points for soft plastics, because that's obviously something that not all councils offer.
No.
And also keeping them out of the municipal waste stream, so out of general waste, where they might end up in landfill or being incinerated. So yeah, the idea is to gather them all in and recycle them.
And are you exploring any other options to plastic?
So we're not. We've had lengthy discussions about this. There's obviously lots of things popping up now with biodegradable bags and paper bags and things like that. So there's pros and cons to all of those things, but that was part of why we joined the Single-Use Plastics Project. So they've led on doing research around all of those alternatives, looking at the energy use, the water use, whether there's a recycling stream for those alternatives. And that seems to be the big downfall, that with compostable and biodegradable plastics, there's no waste stream. So where do they actually go once they've been used? And they typically can weigh more if you use an alternative type of plastic. So you get like water-soluble plastics. They can weigh more in transit. Then you've got your emissions going up from the truck that moves all the product around. So the polybags that we're using, we've looked at everything that the Single-Use Plastics Project have provided. They've put together a nice report for all of the members, which is available on their website, that includes all of the life cycle assessments and research that they've been doing. And the outcome was recycled plastic is the best option for protecting the products, weighing the least in terms of the emissions of the truck moving the product, and protecting those products and having that confidence that that's going to happen, and then using a material that's easily recyclable. So there is a waste stream in the UK and in Europe, which is where the project is focused on those two areas. There is a waste stream for soft plastics, so they can be recycled.
It's a hugely complicated subject, isn't it,
Yeah.
really? Yeah.
Polybags is a big one. Yeah.
The polybags is always a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, right back to when carrier bags were banned, and it was like, oh, that's going to save the world. We're going to stop using single-use carrier bags, but that hasn't happened. So it's massively complicated when you're talking about transport use, water use, energy use, recycling. How the whole thing is just massively complicated.
Yeah.
I can see why your job exists.
Yeah, it's all interesting though, and it's really nice being part of things like the Single-Use Plastics Group, because it means that you're working with other brands looking at the same issue. We're all facing the same challenges and working together on it, which is kind of nice to share ideas and solutions and put your heads together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does seem that there's a lot more collaboration going on in the industry. Probably before your time, but I used to go to an outdoor show called Cola in Harrogate. Camping and Outdoor Leisure Association, a very long time ago.
Right.
And everyone was very secretive. Nobody would talk to each other. Nobody let on what was going on. Nobody would share any best practice or anything like that. But it does seem now that brands, particularly, are working a lot more closely to try and solve this global problem.
Yeah, I think so. And that was another thing that drew me to this area of work, because it's a really collaborative, positive area of work. I think there is a lot of negativity sometimes associated with environmental and sustainability kind of topics. There's a lot of criticism that people can throw at it. But also there's a lot of people trying to create positive change and work together to do that. And that's a really nice thing to be a part of.
Yeah, just trying to do the right thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying.
So who else are you working with? You've mentioned the European Outdoor Conservation Association, but I know that you're working with the BMC as well on their climate change?
Yeah, so they've got the Climate Project, which is their charity, which is working to restore peatland around the UK. So Montane is partnered with the BMC, or the British Mountaineering Council, and through that partnership, we're supporting their climate project by giving 5% of the profits of a dedicated range of products to the climate project. So over the last few years that we've been doing that, I think we've donated them over £25,000.
Wow.
And yeah, the work that they're doing is great because peatland is so important to the habitat in the UK. And it's such a difficult environment to build. Obviously, if you lose it, it takes a long time to build it back up again.
Yeah.
So yeah, the work they're doing
took a little while to build up in the first place.
Exactly.
Didn't it?
Yeah. So
all those trees.
Yeah. So yeah, it's crucial work that they're doing. So because we're a British brand and they're doing work around Britain, we want to support that and support them as part of the partnership as well.
So is there just a quick little question? It's just popped right into my head. Why peat bogs? I mean, I know they are. Well, I think kind of my layman's knowledge is that they are fundamental to the ecology of the mountain in retaining moisture and supporting kind of infrastructure and wildlife and ecology. Do you want to just help me out here?
That's a good description.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Yeah. So that is what they do, and they sequester carbon, so they keep carbon in the ground. And obviously, with climate change, carbon being released is one of the big issues in terms of global warming. So keeping carbon in the ground is super important, and peat is a really efficient way of doing that. But peatland can dry out and or be eroded. So what the Climate Project are doing is going to areas of peatland and planting sphagnum moss, which is a clever type of moss that basically holds loads of moisture. And by planting that into the peatland, they are helping the roots of the moss will help to stabilise the peat so that it's protected from erosion, but also the moss will stoke up all that water, and it means that it'll stay moist rather than drying out. And if there was a risk of wildfires, say, then that can burn the peat, that releases even more carbon and really damages it. I think
we've all seen, haven't we? You go up in the mountains, the kind of the almost like metre deep troughs through dried out peat hags where it just seems to erode really, really quickly. I guess it's quite an unstable kind of substrate.
Yeah.
It's and that sphagnum moss. That's when you walk on it, it's like spongy, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 It's almost like feels a bit like sinking sand, but green.
Yeah, definitely. So it's really good that they're doing that work to prolong the life of the peat and keep it where it is and keep the carbon in the ground.
So you make a specific range.
Yes.
That's branded up with the BMC logo as well, is that right? And
it is.
So
it's
anybody who buys that is contributing.
Yeah, so it's part of our Spring Summer 22 collection, so it's on the website at the moment or in stores at the moment. And it's got the BMC logo on there as well. And 5% of all of the profits from those products goes directly towards the Climate Project.
And that's all made from environmentally friendly products?
So the pants are all organic cotton, and the polyester, I can't remember off the top of my head now what's in there. There's poly cotton tops. The cotton in there is organic.
Right.
Yeah,
because that would be silly otherwise, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Trying to remember what's in the range. Yeah.
So Anna, I mean, my mind's pretty well blown. It's what's becoming patently obvious to me is that this is such a deep and complicated subject that can't just be solved by stopping using a bit of plastic here and there. It goes far deeper than that, and I think the responsibility goes right across the kind of the product chain from end consumer, so their responsibility to look after their kit, to perhaps change their expectations around what that kit is capable of doing and how to use it and how it's going to perform, to the brands around their responsibility to make environmentally friendly product and to educate both retailers and consumers around that story, and also the raw material manufacturers as well who are making the stuff, because from the horror stories about the sheep to I still can't get that image out of my head. There's obviously a lot that needs doing right at source, and I think a lot of people forget about that. Their kind of thought process stops with the brand, and it's like, it's your fault, it's Montane's fault, it's not changing, but you're dealing with problems further down the line that you're trying to solve as well. And that brings me neatly onto some questions that have been sent in by some of our listeners, viewers, customers, people out there in universe. And Phoebe asks, where are your products made and why are they made there?
So our products are made in Asia. They're made in 6 countries, and all the information about those countries and the actual factories is all on our website. So we disclose all of our manufacturing locations. So within our website, there's a page on sustainability and on ethical trading. And within that, there's a map so you can see where all the factories are. There's also a report on there, which is called a social report. We put that together annually. And that looks at everything that we've done in our supply chain over the previous 12 months in terms of the relationship with those manufacturers and what work we've been doing to improve conditions. And the thing that pushes all of that work is our membership with the Fair Wear Foundation. So we became a member in 2019. And ultimately, that membership is us working with the support of the Fair Wear Foundation to improve working conditions for garment workers in our supply chain. So Fair Wear Foundation work with both outdoor brands and fashion brands, and they have the code of conduct, which we had a code of conduct in place anyway before we joined Fair Wear. But what that membership is doing is really supporting us to analyse what's happening in the factories and improve the working conditions. So we have regular audits and training programs with the workers and the management in the factories. And that's all working towards making sure that those workers have got safe working conditions and reasonable working hours, and that they've got written contracts, all that kind of thing. And then all of the information about the work that we're doing, we want consumers to be able to see that and understand what we're doing. So that's all put into the report, and which is on our website. And then once a year, we have a check, which is kind of like an audit from Fair Wear, to make sure that everything we're doing is in line with what they would expect us to do. And it helps to set targets for the year ahead as well. And there's a report on that they put together, and they give us a grade to show that we've passed and what recommendations have been made. And that report's on our website as well.
Okay, so they're a completely independent body of made up of some boffins.
Yeah, so they're an NGO. They're based in Amsterdam.
Right.
Yeah, and they work with lots of brands across the garment industry, but the sole focus is social compliance and working conditions. So it doesn't look at environmental, it just looks at the social side of things.
Okay, so who's looking at the environmental side of things?
So that's the other certification. So that's getting into things like Blue Sign and then these other certificates that we've got around things like the like Okotex and the PFCs, and Blue Sign's a big one.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. Right. So lots going on.
Yeah, there's lots of different things to consider, and all of that is obviously separate to looking at emissions through the whole supply chain. So there's that side of, once you look at the suppliers and what materials they're using, it's looking at how are those materials made and what is the carbon impact of that in terms of what the factory is running on, what forms of transport are used to transport those raw materials or the finished goods. There's a lot of considerations.
A lot of considerations. I mean, given the kind of the recent problems in the Suez Canal with the big boat that got stuck and lots of stuff not coming across, and I know that impacted the outdoor industry as well as many other industries. Is there a case for kind of globalization shrinking and pulling manufacturing closer to source? I mean, Montane is a UK-based company, and I think I'm right in saying predominantly has UK customers. So is there not a case for pulling back manufacturing to the UK? Is that not possible, or even to Europe, to cut down miles? Transport?
Yeah, so that definitely is a consideration, and you do see some brands doing that. I think for us, with the scale of manufacture and the fact that we're working in Asia at the moment, is because the skilled jobs are there, and also that's where the materials are manufactured. So if we were to pull manufacture to Europe or the UK, the fabrics and the trims would all still be made in Asia. Right. So something still has to be shipped. So by manufacturing there, I guess you're shrinking the footprint of the original materials moving to the manufacturer. And then you've also got all of those workers who that's what they're skilled in doing, and that's what we're supporting them, having more training with Fair Wear and things like that to make sure that they're getting adequate training. Yeah. So we want to support people's livelihoods and maintain that and just make sure that it's being done in a responsible way.
Could you ever see a point where the UK makes stuff again?
I don't know, to be honest. It would definitely be interesting to see. We've definitely got the skills and the history there. It's whether there's the people to do it, because that's kind of a skill
kind of
that's been lost.
Really, to making things.
Yeah,
People.
the people. The people and the skills.
Some people with skills.
Yeah, and I think that's been lost a lot in the last few generations.
Yeah.
There's a lot less people now with those skills. And maybe we'll move back towards that as there's maybe more young people coming through doing practical apprenticeships and things over other types of study. So
could that be something that Montane would support, do you think? Some kind of tech school? Or the outdoor industry as a whole. I mean, I don't want to pin that one on you specifically, but there's some big players out there, doing well out of the outdoor industry, and maybe it's a bit of a romantic notion, but I kind of an outdoor manufacturing skills college to train people in this stuff, to try and bring some kind of manufacturing back to the UK to cut down on the environmental impact.
Yeah, possibly. It's not a conversation I've heard happening at the moment, but that's not to say that it's not possible. I guess a lot of those kind of courses around building those skill sets are there. Yeah. It's just engaging young people with wanting to do them and building up that skill set.
Well, there you go. There's a little idea.
Possibly.
I might start a technical skills college and start making some things. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Make things in the UK. Who'd have thought? Talking of making things and making things good, you talked earlier about your repair service. Would you consider a kind of a recycling service, a kind of selling on, repairing and reselling?
Yes. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said, actually, that one came from Simon.
Yes.
One of our listeners, viewers, stroke people out there in the world.
Yeah.
People.
No, it's a good question. In terms of repairing stuff to resell, that is definitely something that we're looking at doing. So we just opened our outlet store in Ashington, which is near our head office in Northumberland, and we'll be selling repaired products in the store. So how that expands in the future as to whether we put them on the website or we can pass that on to selling repaired items at events or through other retailers is yet to be seen. But that's definitely something that's on the cards in the near future. In terms of a take-back scheme to recycle products, I think the assumption there is maybe that brands who offer a take-back service recycle the products. And actually, my kind of take on that is that the infrastructure in the UK doesn't actually exist yet to recycle garments into more garments. So most garments that get sent back to be recycled get downcycled, so they get shredded up and they might be used in floor underlay or car seat stuffing. But it's a downcycled process and then they won't be recycled again after that. Whereas ideally what we want to see is garments being made into more garments and keeping that system going and moving towards that circular model.
Yeah, I guess that could only happen though when the garments themselves are made of fully recyclable materials.
Yes, and that's really challenging because you've got things like, say, an organic cotton T-shirt that's 100% cotton, but it's got a polyester care label in it. It might have a polycotton thread in it, and all of those different materials need to be separated before it can be recycled. So it is super complex, but that to me would be, we need to have that infrastructure there to recycle clothing, whether it's mechanically recycled or chemically recycled. There's all these different ways of doing things to get to different endpoints. But keeping garments in the system for as long as possible is kind of the first thing, I think. Yeah. Buy high quality stuff, care for it properly, get it repaired, sell it on. Keeping things going for as long as possible is the key thing. But we really need that infrastructure here, and I think we wouldn't look to take endless amounts of product back from customers until there's a system where we can then use it to recycle the garments. And that's something that we need the government to commit to. So,
what government?
Quite.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole, Harry. The other questions are all about plastic. They're all about plastic packaging. How can you make your packaging more eco-friendly? How come companies aren't shipping without plastic? I mean, you've answered these, but it's definitely it's the thing that's first and foremost in people's minds when they get a product. you just got to go to the supermarket and buy some apples, and they come wrapped in plastic in a plastic polystyrene tray or whatever, and it's like there's just this. It's like packaging has become the new carrier bag, hasn't it? It's the thing, and as you explained earlier, it's not necessarily the worst part of the problem, is it?
No, and I guess things with the poly bags, they're protecting the product, and you want that because you don't want the energy and the resources that have gone into the product to be wasted. So poly bags are they're an important part of that.
They're part of it.
Yeah, but I guess there's all those other packaging elements that are equally important. So just to touch on a few of the other changes, because there was that question about what can we do to make our packaging as a whole more eco-friendly. So I've talked about the poly bags being 100% recycled and how we're working towards recapturing those to recycle them. But also we've changed all of our hang tags. So they're all now, they used to be black. We've got rid of the black dye. Any inks that are used on them are water-soluble inks. The card that is obviously 100% recyclable because it's card, but it's also FSC certified. So we've made that change with all of the hang tags. And then we've made kind of smaller changes, so things like the plastic Kimballs that you attach the hang tag to the garment. They've changed from being plastic to being a cotton cord. All the little plastic hooks that you hang hats up on in retail stores, they've all changed to be cardboard. And so we've got lots of things throughout all of our products looking at what was plastic and what doesn't need to be plastic, and trying to get rid of single-use plastic items where there is a viable alternative.
Yeah. That just that one little phrase you said there, just what doesn't need to be. Does it all need to be? Couldn't we just be more environmentally friendly by just not making anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be...
There's the nirvana, isn't it?
Making no product.
We could all stop consuming as customers, and then you could stop making as manufacturers, and people could stop making as fabric and material manufacturers, and the world would be a better place.
Eventually we'd run out of clothes, but...
Eventually. Skin's waterproof.
Yeah, I just think there's a huge shift needed from where we are now to people consuming differently, caring for product differently. And we've seen a huge shift in the food industry, like people are really engaged with that. And maybe that's because it feels more direct to them, because what you eat kind of goes directly into you, and people are maybe less engaged with clothing because they don't know or think about the extent of the supply chain and how complex it is. But those shifts, like, I feel like they can happen, but they will take time. But some of the shifts need to be accelerated, and they need to be supported and funded by things like government change and legislation. And we really need those things to happen. But alongside that, we need to do our bit to source responsibly and to educate consumers. Yeah,
I mean, traditionally, the outdoor industry is kind of glacially slow at changing anything apart from colours every season. As a former buyer, I won't get into that. But I completely agree. I think my former comment just then was a little bit tongue in cheek. Obviously, I like wearing nice things, and I like going out in the outdoors and staying warm and dry and feeling comfortable and enjoying what I do. But yeah, the seismic shift has either got to come. You've either got to be pushed into it, so through legislation and through government, or you have to make a personal choice. And I think everybody who kind of sits in between reacts to that. I think it's very hard for brands to push consumers because you're obviously worried about losing sales. You exist to make a profit, to pay your shareholders or whatever. You exist because you're a business and you're making product that could be deemed as a luxury product for people to go out and have a nice time. It's not like you're not going to survive because you haven't got a nice cotton T-shirt with BMC written on it. So it's the shift from what I'm picking up is that as consumers, we have a massive responsibility to respect our kit more, to look after it better, to buy more wisely. So buy once and buy well, buy once, whatever. I can't remember what the phrase is now. My mind's gone funny. And from the actual raw material suppliers to improve what they're doing. Because what I'm picking up through this conversation is that that's still quite a big problem. Fair Wear Foundation and Blue Sign and all these things exist because that end of the supply chain is kind of the little dirty secret that nobody talks about.
Yeah, and I think that's where transparency comes into it, and that's our kind of goal at the moment. It's not to have these sweeping statements of saying we will be, everything will be recycled and everything will be PFC free. It'll be us looking at all of those different elements and then trying to be transparent with consumers. So that's why the changes that we have made, they're either visual things like you'll see that our hang tags are different and that kind of thing. Or it's things that you don't see, like what's happening in our supply chain, and then we put the information on the website. And that's kind of our way of showing consumers what we're doing and taking them with us through that process as to what needs to be looked at, what needs to be improved, what can we do and what can they do. Yeah. So yeah, it's a lot of learning and there's a lot to go at. But
yeah, I think the messaging's changing, isn't it? It's almost like design convergence. Every bit of kit now is good. There's no such thing really as a bad bit of kit. If you're buying a good waterproof jacket, it's going to be a good waterproof jacket. But the messaging needs to be changed so that consumers understand where it's come from, how it's made, how environmentally friendly it is, how sustainable it is, how to look after it, how to maintain that jacket for its life, rather than, it's got a hydrostatic head of 20,000 and NVTR of 25,000 and yeah, it's got pit zips, and yeah, we all know that. That's just a given. It's like when you buy a car, isn't it? It kind of, you get it and you drive it and it works, because they all do nowadays. So the message, there's a great example, isn't it? You look at the automotive industry, how their messaging has changed from it's got loads of horsepower and it's fast to it's environmentally friendly. And I think that's the kind of change that the outdoor industry needs to embrace. And hats off to companies like yourself who are shouting the loudest.
Yeah, there's lots of things to go at, but yeah, I think we're definitely on that journey towards being more transparent and more sustainable. There's just so many things to consider. Hopefully this and what we put together on our website helps consumers to understand all of those things. But yeah, it's definitely something that you're seeing across all industries now, that being environmentally conscious and responsible is a massive focus.
Yeah. It's kind of, it's the most important part of a business, isn't it? Yeah. And it's just you. So. And it's just you doing all this.
It's just me, yeah.
I'll have a little word with Pete. I'll get you some help.
Yeah. But no, I mean, on that front, I guess there is work to be done by colleagues across the business. So it's me driving that. But that's part of it from the internal side, is looking at all of those different departments and the part that everybody can play. So whether they're in sales and the kinds of vehicles that they're using to get around, or whether they're in operations and they're looking at the transportation that we use to move products, to whether they're in the design team and they're looking at literally the materials that are going into the products or the packaging that goes onto the product. There's a lot of different things to consider for different teams, and that's been part of it, is kind of highlighting that to the different departments and saying everybody's got a responsibility and what can we all do to move towards that responsible goal.
Okay, so I guess the kind of the goal, the ultimate goal of any brand is to have all this in place, so you end up with a range that is 100% made of 100% recycled materials and is completely sustainable. And is that just a dream, or is that something that could happen?
I think it's definitely something that brands are working towards, and we are putting a lot more recycled content into our products. So you'll see more and more of that coming through each season. But something that we're doing alongside that, as well as testing the recycled materials to make sure that they actually have the same performance standards as the virgin alternatives, is looking at all of the other types of product materials and making sure that we're sourcing responsibly across all of those other things. So looking at how we source other things like cotton and down and wool, and making sure that we've got those certifications in place so that we know that we're sourcing as responsibly as we can. And one of the things that we have coined around that is our More Sustainable Choice logo. So that's been launched for Winter 22 for consumers, and it goes on the products where they use at least 50% more sustainable materials. And that could be vague, but we've got a criteria for what we're classing as more sustainable, and that criteria is shown on the product page on our website. So if something has the More Sustainable Choice symbol on it, there's a pop-out that tells you what that means. And what we're classing as more sustainable is recycled content, organic cotton, non-mulesed wool, the Responsible Down Standard certified down, and Tencel, which is another cellulose-based fibre with a responsible production method behind it. So if the product has got 50% or more of those materials in it, then it will get the more sustainable choice logo. And if it uses a DWR, the DWR has to be PFC free as well. So it could be 100% recycled with a C6 DWR, and then it wouldn't get the logo. And you'll be able to see on the product page as well what percent of the product is more sustainable. And then our goal, rather than everything being 100% recycled, is that more and more of the product range every season will be classed as more sustainable choice. So that's something at the moment that we're looking around our internal information management, how we capture that and how we communicate that to consumers so that we can set those clear targets and really show people how we're progressing each season.
Okay, so the aim is to grow the Fair Wear range, to get more product into that category.
So of the more sustainable choice stuff, the aim will be for that to eventually be all of the range. So we're starting with what we've got at the moment, which is a bit under half of the range, and then we'll kind of increase that every season. And then with Fair Wear, all of the products are made in factories that are working in line with Fair Wear Foundation principles.
So consumers can go on the website and they can make a conscious choice to choose something that is more sustainable and is Fair Wear and is as eco, a bit of an umbrella word, isn't it, as eco as possible.
Yeah, and I think the thing I would probably encourage people to do there is just to learn as much as they can. So if they want to dig into the product, there will be more information available on the product pages, but we also have information on our sustainability pages. So within the website there is a sustainability page, which is our platform, which is called Further Forever, and within that there's 4 pillars. And within the 4 pillars, there's lots of information around the supply chain, the packaging, the materials, the charities that we support, so people can really get into it and learn about everything we're doing.
Can fully nerd out on sustainability.
Yeah.
And why not? Absolutely, yeah. It's and again, it's we touched on this earlier, didn't we? It's about communication. It's about educating people to make the right choice.
Yeah, definitely.
And ultimately, in the shop, when you're faced with a customer. Somebody walks in, I'm going to Glencoe, for instance, and I need a waterproof jacket. The first thought that goes through our heads here is that, right, I need to make sure they're getting the right product for the right job in the right environment. And quite often, well, probably more often than not, sustainability doesn't come into the argument. And again, that is about changing perceptions and changing things. But is that the retailer's job? Is that the retailer's job? There's a question. I've just thought of that question. Is that the retailer's job?
I think retailers can help with that process in terms of asking the question of consumers or providing information to consumers in the way that this podcast does. But I suppose really it needs to come from that behavioural change, and brands need to provide the products. So not only do consumers want to be looking for more sustainable products, it also wants to just be a given that when you buy a product, it is made of more sustainable materials and the brand has made that choice for you.
Yeah, and it's right, and it's fit for purpose.
And it's fit for purpose, and that's why it's such a gradual thing. I think maybe some people kind of wonder why the process isn't faster, but it's a really slow process, making sure that you've done all the fabric testing, then you've done the wear testing, before it gets to a commercial level where it's being sold to consumers. We want to know that if you're paying a reasonable amount for a product and taking it out to an environment that could be challenging or potentially dangerous, you want it to perform, and you want it to perform for a long time. So
and you don't want to have to think about it performing. It just has to perform. So I guess that's the end goal, is having products that are just made of more sustainable materials and that product performance hasn't been compromised. Good. Well, good luck with that.
Thanks.
I think your job is very secure for decades to come.
Yes, plenty to keep me busy.
Plenty to keep you busy and lots to do. Okay, Anna, I am officially brain fried. It's been an absolute joy to have you here to talk to us about Montane's work that they're doing with the environmental and sustainable products. I think you're doing a brilliant job, and I've learned an awful lot, and I hope our listeners have learned an awful lot too. and that they will go and look for more information. I think that's the key, isn't it? It's to get people educated, learning about this kind of stuff so they can make the right decisions around the kind of kit they're buying. So to that end, we will put all the requisite links on this podcast to all of Montane's material that's available. They'll be in the section below. As usual, if you have any comments or questions, please stick them in the box below. Harry does look at them, I think, and he does reply to them. He's nodding. Yes, you do, don't you, Harry? Yes. I even do sometimes as well, but I'm not allowed to very much nowadays because I can become a little irrelevant. But anyway, thanks very much. This has been an absolute pleasure. And again, thank you to Anna for making the journey down today on a very, very hot day, sat in a very hot room with no windows and some very bright lights. Thank you, Harry. So all that's left to say is, again, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this series of podcasts from Trekitt. We'll have more interesting guests in the future. And keep tuned in, subscribe, you know what to do. Find the podcast wherever you find your podcasts. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much. Toodaloo.